Hello, my name is Dawn Colley and I work for the Manx Wildlife Trust. I'm the Biodiversity Education Officer there, and today we've come along to our beautiful reserve at Close Sartfield and we're looking for something a little bit more unusual. Probably wildlife you haven't thought about, but we definitely have it here. I'll just scan around so you can see the most beautiful views from this reserve. So we're going to have a look first of all for the tracks and the signs that this creature is around. So if you follow me, we're just going to go down this path here and look for some of those signs. We're walking down the track now and already I can see a really good sign that these things are around. If you look just here, you'll see the remains of one of these animals, and of course we're looking at wallabies. Just a little word before we have a little bit closer look at the skeleton of this animal. Our Close Sartfield Reserve has some of the loveliest orchids out. Please do keep to the footpaths. Though I'll be stepping off to show you certain things from the footpaths, please do keep them because we don't want any damage to the orchids. What we've got here is remains of a wallaby, and if I talk you through what we're looking at, this is a pelvic section. We've got a scapula, which is your shoulder blade. We've got various vertebrae, and we've also got parts of the ribs. And oh, this is very interesting. Here we've got part of the lower jaw. Now, wallabies are herbivores, so they're busy eating the vegetation around here, and as you can see, it's very tough vegetation. So the big difference here is there's this massive tooth that sticks out at the front, which is for cutting that vegetation. If it's really tough, you know yourself, if you have a tough bit of carriage, you really have to fight with that knife. And here you can see the molars all in a very straight line. We know this is a wallaby. If it was a kangaroo, it would have been more curved, and that's because the foods that wallabies eat need grinding down more than the food that a kangaroo would. So straight line, lots of molars, cutting tooth at the beginning. Definitely we've got a wallaby. So we're going to carry on around the reserve and see what other signs we can see. So I've just come across another sign that wallabies are around in the area, and I'm just going to turn the camera around so you can see what I'm looking at. If we scan down here, I don't know if you can see, there's quite a well-worn path here. You can see starting this muddy area, and actually if we get a bit closer up to this twig, you can actually see where they've been gnawing off the branches of it, and it's actually quite a well marked track. You can see it going off there. Now, wallabies aren't particularly small creatures. The males are about 1 metre tall and the females are just a little bit smaller, and they are quite wide, so when they go bouncing around they do tend to leave very big tracks through the undergrowth, and they can actually do quite a lot of damage. I'm just going to follow this one because you'll see on the banking where they land that it's quite eroded away where the vegetation would have been. So I found yet more evidence of wallabies just here. If you can see down here, but this is Wallaby Poo, and very typically you find them in groups like this. They're usually about 3 centimetres across in like rounded lumps, okay, and a very dark black colour. Now, anyone who knows me knows I'm very messy, but if I pick some up, it's very black on the outside, but if I pull it there, and if you can see inside, you can see exactly what they've been eating, which is lots of grass, lots of vegetation. You can see all the fibres in there. So definitely we have wallabies in this area. Please, if you do come, obviously I'm not encouraging people to pick up poo and have a good look at it. Okay, so now we've come right into the heart of the Curragh zone in Close Sartfield. The Curragh zone, as you can see, is a wetland area, mainly with willows all around. Now, our wallabies are a bit of a surprise thing to see outdoors. We wouldn't expect them as wandering around in our native countryside, but they did escape from the wildlife park. And we think back in the 70s, and they escaped in batches, so they've been added to. And this is the sort of area they absolutely love. They love to be in woodlands, shrubland that is quite near to grazing areas. So we just walked through the meadows, so this is ideal habitat for them. Now these wallabies are Redneck Wallabies or Bennett's Wallabies, and they actually come from Tasmania. Everyone thinks about Australia, really hot, really beautiful, really dry. Tasmania, you can up in the mountains get temperatures down to -2. In the summer it can get up to 20. So actually it's very like the Isle of Man. We have a bit more rainfall maybe, but they even in Tasmania have been seeing the snow. So they're quite adapted to living here. So we're going to just have a little of an explore in the Curragh area, see if we can see any more signs of them. So if we walk along here, and I'm looking in the mud in particular, just over here, if I walk over here, there's some very good signs just here. So what we're looking at are these 2 lines here and 2 lines here. And what's happened here is the wallabies jumped from here over to here, and we're just looking at the back legs. So all that's been left are the back legs. They do have 4 legs, and if I show you a little picture, okay, this is very typical of wallaby footprints. So these are the back legs, and these are the front paws. They have 5 digits on their front paws, just like our hands, and they do look very like hands. So as they're moving, when they first go to move, they'll often put their front legs down and then do a little tiny hop. But then when they really want to get moving, like this one obviously has, they'll just rise up onto their back legs. And here, you usually see about 3 marks. What happens is their second and third toes are actually fused together. And often, I don't know if you can see here, they have a massive claw, and that triangle is the shape of the claw that's left. They put incredible pressure on these back legs as they're hopping. So the front legs are usually used for grooming, they're used for pulling trees, leaves down in trees, but they're not usually generally used for locomotion. It is usually the back legs. And that wonderful tail they have is there as a balancing act. So it keeps them steady, but also when they sit up, you'll often see them sort of leaning back, and they're leaning back on that tail as a tripod to keep themselves steady. So there's a really good sign there are wallabies in the area. So I'm standing under a tree now, and this is more signs and evidence that wallabies have been in the area. And I'm just going to show you what they've done. I'll just turn the camera around. Okay, so if we have a look at this bark on this tree, you can see that it's been pulled off, that we've got very little left. And they tend to eat the willow bark during the winter months more, when there's less vegetation around that they can eat. You can see this shredding process is very typical of them, and they've really pulled off quite a lot of the bark here. Now, of course, if you damage all this amount of bark, I'm afraid it's not very good news for the tree. So they are having an impact on the area from what they're eating. I do know it's the wallabies as well, because I've actually stood and watched them eating the bark off this tree. So we were talking about the damage that wallabies are doing, and down on this tree, we just panned down, you can see that the bark has been really stripped here. And if you look really closely, you'll see little marks, which are quite clearly where it's been scooped out by the wallabies. Unfortunately, when they peel off the bark to this extent, this tree is going to die. Not all the marks on trees are from where they've been eating. Sometimes as they jump over, they clip it with that very, very long toe and leave a mark. And just here, my very crumpled bit of paper, is a lovely illustration of a wallaby foot. So we're talking about the toes fused together. Here we can see them. This is obviously the back leg. the two smaller toes, and this is that massive claw that leaves that triangular mark. So you can understand why they leave the marks they do on the ground. So you've just been looking at the Longfield, which has some of our loveliest orchids in the summer, and some quite unusual species as well. But we do have a bit of a problem with our lovely wallabies. We've got this wonderful fence surrounding it, but if you can see at the bottom, we've had to put planking and we've had to reinforce it with stakes. That's because wallabies are very good at escaping. They can, with that huge great big claw that they have, they're very good at digging, and they've been digging underneath our fence, and of course we want to protect the orchids. I've come to show you a little experiment that the Manx Wildlife Trust is doing. Behind me you can see a stand of willow that is being coppiced on a regular basis, and if you can see the fence posts and the wire mesh that's been placed around it to protect them from the wallabies. Now if I just scan the camera around, you can see this next stand. Now these willows were planted at exactly the same time. Now what happened was they weren't fenced off at the same time, they were fenced off 3 months later, and you can see the incredible difference in growth rates on them. So obviously these willows weren't protected at an early stage, and it has affected their growth. Now the wallabies are here because they escaped from the wildlife park, which is not very far away from the reserve, back in the 70s, and they've escaped in several batches over time. There is some debate about whether they're healthy or whether we periodically get eyesight problems with them, because I've often seen ones that what appears to be cataracts. But we reckon at the moment there's probably about 160 wallabies out in the wild around the Isle of Man, and they're stretching quite a long way as well. They come from all the way from the Curraghs. They've been seen down at Silverdale, at the Braid. They seem to be spreading all over the island. While we got the chance, I'm going to just talk to you about the life cycle of wallabies, which is really, really interesting. So the babies are born after about 33 days, and they're completely hairless, they're completely tiny. How tiny are they? Well, stick up your thumb, have a look. They're about the same size as your thumb. So they're born, and they have to make their way into that lovely baby pouch that they grow in. So here's a picture of a baby wallaby about 33 days old. And you can see, completely hairless. There's not a lot that it's got that makes it look like a wallaby even. So this little wallaby has to make its way into the pouch, and the mum makes it a bit easier for it by licking a pathway through her own fur so that it can climb up and pop into that pouch. So it's going to stay in that pouch for quite some time. The pouch inside is completely hairless. It just nestles up next to its mum's skin, and it's a bit like being born at 33 days like that. It's a bit like a baby being born after 2 months of being inside the mum's womb. So it really is quite vulnerable. So inside that pouch, the mum actually sweats, and the sweat that she gives off is antibacterial and protects the baby. Now the baby, there's inside that pouch, there's different teats, and these teats serve different stages of the life of the baby. So about 3 months in the pouch, and then the baby starts to grow fur, and the milk changes. The milk gets more sulfur in it, so that the baby can actually grow that fur. The mum is quite capable of feeding 2 wallabies at once, so she could have a youngster with her. Now wallabies stay with their mums for about 1.5 years. So she could actually still have another youngster with her. So she can feed 2 different sorts of milk to those 2 different sorts of wallabies. If it's likely that wallaby is going to be born and she's still suckling and she won't have time to adapt that wallaby to the new milk source, then she can actually freeze that embryo at a certain stage and then give birth to it a bit later. So after about 9 months, that wallaby is quite happy coming out of the pouch, having a little hop around. They'll pop back in for a little bit of safety. So it's a pretty awesome design of the pouch. The other thing babies do when they're little, when they need to pee, when they need to poo, if you're that tiny, you're not going to keep crawling out of the pouch. They actually pee and poo in their mum's pouch. Not too much of a problem because the mum can actually absorb some of it, but she also cleans out the mess of the baby. So there, not only human mums have a tough time with nappies, but adult wallabies have a tough time cleaning up after their babies too. So I'm standing up on the bird hide at Close Sartfield, and I've just spotted some wallabies grazing in the field just around the bird hide. So we've got a group of 3 wallabies there, which is quite usual. Usually we see them just in groups of about 3 around the reserve. Now wallabies are crepuscular. That means they come out at dawn and dusk. And so that's when you're more likely to see them. The other times to see them is early springtime and autumn, when the leaves are off the trees, so you get a good view of them. Now when it becomes those times, so we're used to seeing them out in the day like this, about 2 or 3 in a group. But however, if you live around here, and people have reported into us that at dusk on their lawn they can have as many as 30 to 40 wallabies grazing on their lawn. When wallabies get together in a big group like this, we call them a mob. So though they look cute and fluffy, they are creating problems for the people who live around here, because obviously they're going into their gardens and eating their vegetables and things. The other thing is, wallabies often lie in a form during the day, which is very like a hare would do. So they just make a little scoop in the ground really, and just lie flat in it, and then they just sit and they just lazily eat all that's around it. Now that could include wildflowers. They're pretty indiscriminate of what they'll eat.